your costuming as one of Tim's Star Wars characters. Stand up so we can appreciate you. Spotlight panel at AwesomeCon. My name is Briella. If you ever on StarWars.com, you might recognize my name from there from a few things, but you don't care about me, and that's okay. I accept this. The man you care about is the one next to me who needs no introduction, but Tim, welcome back to AwesomeCon.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Here is on this board, which often upstages the entertainment.
Extremely fair.
Especially among 4-year-olds.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, Tim, but I do, it's true. You've been writing Star Wars books for a really long time now.
Yeah, since 1991.
Does it feel different now than it did back then?
Not really. I mean, I'm working in my own little corner of the Star Wars universe. There's more I have to coordinate against with new TV shows and movies and such, and make sure continuity stays correct rather than going all over the train as we used to in Bantam, because we didn't have the resources to stay coordinated with everybody. I write faster.
Yeah, you did 2 in a year.
But there's no real difference now that Lucasfilm is with Disney. Actually, the big thing is a story group that does coordinate everything, keeps track of all the details, so I don't have to, or more likely, I don't know not to do something because I don't know what else is in the works, comic book-wise, TV show, etc. But I'm still writing books. I still send it to an editor. The editor runs it by the Lucasfilm editor, and we've added the extra step of the story group gets eyes on it, and then it's published. And if I've done my job, people buy it and enjoy it.
I have good news for you. I think people bought your books.
Oh.
So let's go back. I know you told the story before, at least once, if not more, here at AwesomeCon itself, but how did you get started writing Star Wars books in the first place?
In 1988, Lou Aronica, who is head of Bantam Spectra, wrote a letter to Lucasfilm suggesting that since George didn't seem to be doing anything more with Star Wars, that he would like to pick up the series after Return of the Jedi, which was an era nobody had been allowed to write in before. A 3-book saga. It took Lucasfilm about a year to decide whatever was going on behind the scenes, to decide to go ahead with this. So they contacted Lou. They said, find us an author and let's talk contract. The Bantam editors got together and made up a short list of authors in their stable they thought could do Star Wars, sent samples of our writing out to Lucasfilm. The people there decided they liked my style best, and I got a early November 4 in the afternoon, Tuesday, not that I remember, a phone call from my agent saying, Tim, we have a very interesting offer here. The 2 kickers on that is the editor, who had just bought 3 books of mine for Bantam, almost didn't put my name in that list because she didn't want me getting sidetracked by media stuff as she put it later on. The other kicker is I'd been with Bantam at that point a grand total of 6 weeks, and just moved over from main books. My agent had actually considered taking me to tour instead, because the editor who wanted to work with me was offering a little more money. And I remember him saying at the time, I think Bantam's where you should be right now. So I talked to him for 45 minutes or so, told him I would give him my answer the next day, then I went off and panicked. Chance to do a quantum leap in my career beyond anything I ever would have guessed or hoped for. Also my chance to fall flat on my face in front of millions of Star Wars fans who would never forgive me. I'd also never done a trilogy before, in the sense of a single story in 300,000 words. I'd done connected novels, but that's a little bit different. Wasn't sure I could handle that. By the next day, I had enough of an idea. I thought, yeah, I can get a 3-book story out of this. As to the other, I still don't know if I can do Star Wars, but I would be crazy not to try it. So went ahead and accepted. You should know that when the book came out in May or June, I think May of 1991, nobody knew whether Star Wars fans still existed. The fans were quiet because there's nothing to glom onto since 8 years after the last movie. The bookstores were equally unenthused. They wanted 100,000 copy first printing. They printed up 70,000 because that's all the orders they got. That printing was gone in about 2 weeks, I think, and my editor called and said, we're going back for 60,000 more. She called back the next day and said, no, we're going to do 2 runs of 30,000 each because we can get them out faster that way. The book hit #1 on the New York Times list. It kept John Grisham's The Firm out.
That's awesome.
Since then, but by the time it was in the top 10 for about 13 weeks, by the time it fell off the top 10, Bantam and Lucasfilm had made a deal for 12 more books, and it has been going on ever since then.
Good news, I guess, for Star Wars fans. So Tim, you and I have done some panels at AwesomeCon before.
Yes, we have.
A couple. So the last time I sat up with you here as a moderator for a panel was, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And at the time...
You're thinking early 2016?
That sounds about right, but I'm going to be honest with you, I have no concept of time after the last 2 years. But it was about 4 or 5 years ago before we were between season 2 and 3 of Rebels.
Yeah.
And there was a really interesting tweet that came out from Dave Filoni of a book spine with the caption, "There's always a little bit of truth in legends." And I may have interrogated you about it multiple times because it looked like it was the heir to the Empire book spine. So,
as it turned out, it was, but I didn't know that at the time.
So, Tim, I have to ask you, what Star Wars secret are you keeping from me this time?
Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader. I actually have no secrets. I have periodically mentioned to my editor to tell Lucasfilm, if you want me as a consultant or advisor or to bring coffee on what I'm doing next, I'm available. I get crickets back. This is apparently not unusual. Lucasfilm is very paranoid about leaks, and Disney is worse. So I would love to be involved. At the moment, no one is talking to me about what's happening with Thrawn, what's happening with Ahsoka, really what's happening with anything. At this point, if I can't get an advisory role, I think I'm going to go for, can I get a cameo in the show?
So grateful, Tim.
Because then, I'm thinking I get one line, Admiral on the bridge, and that would be all I need. Because at that point, I can start bringing a stack of 8x10 glossies and 350 pounds of books to each convention.
I think you're just going to have to bring both.
Yeah, I will probably have to.
Yeah.
But, no, seriously, nobody's talking to me.
All right, I'm going to remember this in a year.
Yeah.
But actually, you set me up pretty well for my next question, and I know you didn't need to do it because I would not let you see my notes before we started. So, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen all of Star Wars Rebels, which I'm about to spoil the ending, but you really should go watch Rebels. It's amazing. But at the end of the last season, things did not go well for Thrawn in terms of a space whale. And we haven't seen him or Ezra since. So, as someone who, you're a little bit of an expert in Thrawn, and who probably has lots of thoughts about him. What do you think Thrawn, this is, and again, I want to clarify, this is all just speculation.
I know nothing.
You know nothing.
Seriously, I don't.
So no one, please no one write articles about this saying Tim Zahn said this. What do you think Thrawn and Ezra are up to right now?
If I was the one designing it, bear in mind we've got about a 9-year gap between the end of Rebels and wherever he shows up in Ahsoka, since that's 5 years after Return of the Jedi. So we've got a 9-year gap. If Thrawn and Ezra are still together, that means somehow Thrawn was able to persuade him there's important work that only the two of us can do. The two options I would offer Filoni, if he asked me, which he hasn't, one is that Thrawn persuades Ezra, you have friends who will deal with Palpatine. There are threats out here nobody else is taking seriously. It's between you and I have to do this. The second carrot I would throw at Ezra is the Skywalkers, the Chiss navigators. Ezra will recognize this as a small, limited use of Force prescience. And I can see Ezra thinking, if I can train them, if I can teach them more about the Force, we could get a whole group of Jedi going out here. I think that would be an enormous carrot to dangle in front of Ezra. But those are the two ways I would pitch that. The way I would pitch the relationship would be similar to the TV show White Collar, the FBI guy. This is what you were thinking, or this is...
That was not where I thought you were going to go.
Oh.
Now I just wanted to know which one of them is the one with the ankle circlet and heist.
It's the dynamic of we work together, we trust each other to a certain level, but there's a little bit of somebody's finagling, somebody is manipulating, and I'm not going to fall for it. That kind of dynamic. Just we work well together, but we do not and will not ever entirely trust each other. Those are the three things I would pitch to Filoni if he asked me, which he has not.
I'm sorry, I'm going to need a minute.
Where were you thinking I was going to go?
I don't know, but I'm going to need a minute because now I just can't get our thief Thrawn out of my head. And then just Thrawn and Ezra.
He is the art expert, so, you know.
If anyone does fan art of it in this room, please at me, Chaos Grail on Twitter. I'm going to come back to the Skywalkers in a minute because it was one of my questions, and that fits incredibly well with a lot of what she wrote in these books, especially towards the end. But correct me if I'm wrong, when you came back to do the first Thrawn book, what was that, 2017? That was just supposed to be a one and done, right?
Yes.
So, but then we got alliances, and we got
just for the
treason.
record,
Yes.
2017 Star Wars Celebration. Thrawn was published Tuesday. The convention started, I think, Thursday. By the time, let's see, midway through the convention, first of all, they sold out. They were selling out like crazy of not just the special editions, but also everything Barnes & Noble could bring. Every night they were scrambling to get more books in. It was Easter weekend, which also complicated shipping questions and such. But the 2 weeks that the first printing of Heir to the Empire was gone, by the middle of Celebration, 3 or 4 days later, the stock had gone down to the point where Tom Bowler said, we're going for a second printing. I think this persuaded them that, yeah, this one and done, let's go for a second one.
So that leads very well to my next question because, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're not really considered a trilogy, correct?
No, they were contracted individually, which meant I can bring things into books 2 and 3 that I set up in book 1, but I can't start character arcs and plot threads in Thrawn that I will be able, that I know I can finish off in what turned to be out to be alliances and treason. So they are much more loosely connected, but not a single story. This is what happens, this book, when you give me a trilogy.
Yeah.
This is 170-odd thousand words because I got so many character arcs and plot threads to resolve from the first 2.
549 pages, Tim.
Yeah. But this is what happens. This is the danger of giving me a trilogy. I can get really big, and I don't think there's excess wordage in there. It's just I've got all these characters I need to resolve to some level, and plot threads that need to be ended, and I need some kind of kick-butt ending battle to deal with. So yeah, the others were loose set. The Thrawn trilogy original, Heir to the Empire, and this one are the only two trilogies I've ever contracted for. Everything else has been standalones, or in the case of the Hand of Thrawn duology, the book got too big, Lucas postponed the movies a year. Oh, we need more books to fill in that Bantam. How about we split this book into two parts? Because I'm not anywhere near done with my outline. But yeah, everything else has been one book at a time.
Kind of just got ahead of me of where I was going with that question, because I was going to ask you.
The force is strong with me.
It clearly is. I was going to ask you to talk through the process of how we kept getting those three books, but I'm pretty sure the answer to that is y'all bought a lot of books.
The way it works is if Thrawn continues to bring in money, they'll continue to have me write books about them. Conversely, if I continue to bring in money, they'll keep me around. And when Thrawn and I don't, I'll be doing something else. Just the way it works.
So you said this one is only the second trilogy
Yes.
done. Can you talk us a little through about...
The second Star Wars trilogy.
Star Wars
Conquerors
trilogy,
were also a setup.
Talk us through a little more like how the process, your writing process changes when you know you have a trilogy that you're setting out for the one to do.
Well, they're semi-self-contained stories, but with plot threads going on through all three books. Continuing characters, I now I know where this character is starting. I know roughly where they're going to end, so now I build them, bring them along through their development, knowing I can wait another book to bring them to their point of stability, whatever, just the end of this particular arc. With Thrawn, alliances, and treason, I could do again a little of that, but mostly I can't set up something for the future. I can just pull in from the past books. It's much more challenging to do the trilogy because I do have to make this an epic thing. I've got to have a lot of characters that are going to be interacting together, plot threads to resolve, but it is more satisfying because I can make this the epic story that I always like to tell epic stories because they're fun and they're epic.
No spoilers, but when I was finishing this one, I hit a point like 100 pages from the end where I was like, oh, I know where he's going with this. Holy crap! And it was good. It was good.
Did you know?
I mean, I figured it out like towards the end. I was like, oh, that's how we get from here to that's how he gets there. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, the idea of anything like this is to give the reader enough to let them figure it out a little bit before the characters do.
Yeah. I mean, but no one figures anything out before Thrawn. That's just not going to happen. I know I'm smarter than and is not for Admiral Thrawn. But I do want to dive into these ascendancy books a little bit more because they all came out during the pandemic, correct? So we haven't really had a chance to talk about them yet. And one of the cool things I really liked about them, you got to do a little bit of it in, I think it was treason, but you really got to delve into the Chiss and like their society and their culture. And thankfully, we now have a little cheat sheet for names and like houses and all, which I refer to a lot while reading. But it's a way you haven't gotten to do either in canon or even in Back in Legends. So how much of their culture when you were writing this time around was something you've had in your head for like 30 years now, and how much of it was stuff that you're like, oh, like I'm coming up with it now?
Pretty much the second. The way this worked was back in, where was it, 2015 on the celebration in Chicago? What year was that?
2019. No, it was 2019.
Oh, that's right, that was 19. I had finished up Thrawn Treason, and wasn't sure what else we could do. The period after Rebels was closed off to me. Tom Holler, the editor, my editor at Del Rey, took us to breakfast one of the mornings of the convention and said, what we would like you to do is go back in time to before Thrawn comes to the Empire and his life in the Chiss ascendancy dealing with threats to his people. And Tom is pitching this whole thing. I'm thinking, this sounds interesting. How are we going to sell this to Lucasfilm? And he finished his pitch and said, oh, by the way, Lucasfilm's already signed off on it. Oh, okay. We don't have to argue about this thing. And the next great moment came when Pablo Hidalgo emailed me, or it came through Tom, and said, everything that other people have written about the Chiss are legends. You can ignore that as much as you want, and you can build the culture from the ground up. So I took the bits and pieces I had put into things like Outbound Flight, Hand of Thrawn duology. To backtrack, I don't usually work out whole ideas until I need them, because it's often a waste of time and effort. I've got projects that I spent more time developing that are never going to happen.
Yeah.
So I typically leave any details, any amplifications until it comes time for that. So I had some of the foundation for the ascendancy and their culture that I put in other books. Now I took those, started building the walls, ceiling, floor, decorating everything. I started building it as I went. So it was something that I just built as this, worked it into the storyline, the plot, the characters, as I was outlining and then as I was writing. Certain things were kind of surprising to me, but okay, that's obvious now when I'm actually thinking about it. In the United States, the military is under civilian control. Well, with the Chiss ascendancy, the dealings between the 9 ruling families and the 40 great families, all of that politics gets intermixed so much, you want your military out of civilian control, because it's just going to be chaos that way. So exactly the reverse of what we've got here. I hadn't thought about that until I was actually writing it and was doing the consequence testing. Okay, this is the politics. What consequences will come from that for the rest of the culture and society? And then going into things like in Greater Good, where I got to see a simple rancher and his family and how the culture and society works at the lower levels, not the high and mighty and powerful. So I got to do a large amount, a large breadth of just thinking about how this works and how they live. And I mean, that's, again, part of the fun of Epic, is building that culture, that society, that universe.
This is a very selfish and nerdy question, but can you explain to me, like, I know the family part,
Yeah.
but can you explain to me how Chiss naming conventions work? Please take me to school.
The first part of the name is the family.
Right.
The middle part is a more personal thing. I'm not entirely sure what the third part is.
I didn't understand that either.
Well, you try never to give people everything. When we started with the Chaos Rising, I suggested to Tom, how about Thrawn's adopted name is Mithron, and leave the ODO off, and that'll be added in later for some good reason. And he said, that sounds interesting. What would that entail? I said, I have no idea, but I'm going to come up with something within 2 books of it.
It was great.
It was just something there. This is something to see if the fans notice that in those earlier parts of the story, the memories parts, his name's different. And will they catch on? Of course they will catch on. They did.
Who do you think we are, Tim? Better that I wasn't missing something, because I was rereading last night, and I was like, where was it? Where was it?
No.
Okay.
Something we were discussing with our son about Harry Potter was I was pointing out to him, there are 2 ways of working with a throwaway line. A throwaway line is something you can, such as Outbound Flight, for example. It's something you either are setting up for something future, or you can go back looking at what your throwaway lines are in later books and develop them. And both are legitimate ways of doing it. We don't know how J.K. Rowling did all of the Harry Potter stuff, which approach she used, or a mixture. I tend to be, unless it's a trilogy where I know certain things are going, I tend to be okay, what did I set up here that I haven't used yet?
You mentioned the memory sections in each book, and you use them a little bit differently in each part of the trilogy. So can you talk us through, I mean, it's a little more obvious for Chaos Rising, but what made you pick what you wanted to do with each of the memory sections for the books?
With Chaos Rising, we have the major plot thread, the major story, but I want to dip back into some of Thrawn's past. So it's non-chronological in that sense, but I didn't want to go through all of these things. I wanted the story to start where it did and then have the immediacy of all of that, but I wanted some background for him. In Greater Good, I wanted to see things, how the bad guys were setting things up. And then in Lesser Evil, I wanted, well, you saw what I wanted. I wanted to bring back Thross, his brother, and how that happened, how that relationship worked. And people who had always liked Thross from Outbound Flight knew it was coming and hated me for it anyway.
I wouldn't say hated you. That's a strong word. It's okay.
I'm sorry, but you knew it had to happen.
Yes, but that's the wonderful thing about books. Like, even when you know bad things are going to happen, it doesn't make them hurt any less. Let's also talk about the concept of the Skywalkers, and I'm not sure if everyone here has gotten a chance to delve into the Ascendancy trilogy yet, so could you explain for folks a little bit what they are, and then where did the inspiration for that sort of force user come from?
One of the things we needed to establish when we first set up the Ascendancy book, actually when Thrawn and the other books were done as well, is why this section called the Unknown Regions is unknown. Why the Empire and the Republic beforehand have not moved into that. And one of the suggestions I did, there were probably a couple of different reasons, but one of the thoughts that I suggested was that the hyperspace lanes are really chaotic. You've got, I had talked about a series of cascading supernovas that threw large masses at high rates of speed through that section, so that because masses affect hyperspace travel, that has the pattern, the place is always changing. It's hard to anticipate where anything is. You can go a couple of systems, recalibrate and go a couple more systems, but it's very slow travel. Skywalkers are chiss with particular abilities in the Force of the prescience part. They can see a few seconds into the future and therefore can guide ships faster, and you can go farther without having to stop and reset everything. The key is that they start getting this ability or noting this ability, what I say, 5 years old or something, like 4 or 5 years old, and they lose it at puberty, basically. They stop being able to touch the Force in this way. And that I unashamedly stole for myself with coming of age with kids who developed telekinetic powers and lost it at puberty as well. But the idea being that now we've got all these big warships, we've got diplomatic couriers, anything that's going outside the relative stability of the Chiss Ascendancy area that needs to go quickly carries a 5 to 13-year-old girl who will do your navigating for you in hyperspace. It just struck me, this is, again, you want something different than what's been done before. This is entirely differently from how the Empire and the Republic work with droids and such. And there are no droids in the Ascendancy either. It took my editor 2 books to notice that, I think. Again, there are going to be reasons for that. Along with the hyperspace lanes, there are also magnetic and electromagnetic fluxes going through the region, also making navigation different. But I suggest that will also mess with the compactness of a droid memory. It's got to be so dense and compact that this is going to mess with that. Hence, droids don't last long, hence we don't have them. But these Skywalkers, I mean, that was again a throwaway line when in Alliances, when Thrawn first meets Anakin Skywalker, and is amused by the name because we have people we call Skywalkers as well. Okay, nice little joke, throwaway line. Okay, we want your 3 books on the Ascendancy. Okay, Skywalker's going to be in this thing again.
You did that to yourself, Tim.
Say what?
You did that to yourself.
Yeah, well, self-Aikido we call ourselves. It's throwing your own weight thrown against you. Anyway, but that was, okay, this is something different, and now we do the consequence testing. What are the consequences of having children running the ships, or at least navigating the ships? You're going to have a caretaker, some adult taking care of them aboard the ship because children. So I developed the caretakers as well. And then how does it work? What are the consequences of this? How long can they run without a break? Child labor law type of thing, but just the exhaustion that you might get doing all of this. What are the consequences? This is going to have to be a secret. What are the consequences? What other people are? What are other races doing? Do they do this sort of thing? And just work that into the whole culture. There are other species, groups of species that can do the same kind of navigation, but the Chiss are keeping their Skywalkers dead dark secret as much as they can. Because Chiss.
Yeah. We're going to take questions in a minute or two, so if you start thinking about them now, if you would like to ask me. I am going to ask a very selfish question again, because I'm the moderator and I can do that. How did it feel to get to write good old Pelion again in Treason?
It was fun to bring Pelion back. Filoni had done this the last 5 minutes of last episode of Rebels. He mentioned his name.
I was watching with 2 people who hadn't read Legends, and I yelled and was on the floor because I was so happy about it, but sorry, continue.
And then we bring in Jason, Hera and Kanan's son, with the correct spelling of Han and Leia's son. So Filoni was throwing all sorts of Legends stuff into Rebels, I think just for the fun of it. By the way, did you notice his intro at the London celebration to the season 3 trailer for Rebels?
You want me to remember all the way to that?
No, because I remember because I knew it was coming with his trailer. But he is talking, and okay, let's do the trailer. Let's expand our universe a little.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because Legends were the expanded universe. So a little nod there, and virtually nobody caught at the time because they didn't know it was coming.
I think people caught it. I think people caught it because we had already lost our minds like a month before over. There's always a little bit of truth in Legends.
Yeah, that's true. You do have that truth. And
yeah.
I really have not seen that.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. It's all right. I do want you to know when they did that trailer, I was watching with some of my 501st Garrison mates, and I'm told I almost hit the ceiling when Thrawn appeared on the screen, and I brought back down to earth, so that was very exciting. All right, let's do some questions right here in the front, and speak up loudly so we can hear you.
So what's next for your writing and Thrawn?
What's next is we are still trying to find a story to pitch to Lucasfilm that they might go for. A lot of Del Rey's attention has been with the High Republic at the moment, so figuring out what we can send to Lucasfilm is a little bit problematic. So I'm just waiting for Tom to have time for us to discuss things. Lucasfilm also has been kind of busy, you may have noticed lately, so it's really kind of all up in the air at the moment. But I've got at least half a dozen pitches I'm ready to send whenever people are ready to see them.
We just got back to the celebration later, I learned that.
Yeah.
Right here?
Between Legends and Canon, what's your favorite Thrawn book?
Well, I see the question is what my favorite Thrawn book was. I see my Star Wars books as...
Pick your favorite child, Tim.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I see it as a 16-book saga with interlocking characters and such. If I had to pick one that was just absolutely fun to write, it would be the original title, Solos 11, Scoundrels.
Yes.
Because it's a heist movie in the genre of Ocean's 11 or The Sting, where we're all working together. We've got a 10-minute warning here. So, okay.
Please keep talking about Scoundrels. You know I love that book.
Yes.
If you haven't read it,
Need to bring it on.
yeah, if you haven't read Scoundrels, please do that. It's so fun. And you included winter, which made me
Yes.
happy. Okay.
Just for you.
It was not just for me, but I appreciate that. Let's go right here in the block. Yes.
Do you think the High Republic books kind of stole or borrowed the idea of the Pathfinders and Skywalkers? Or at least,
Say again.
Do you think the High Republic books borrowed the ideas of the Skywalkers, Pathfinders?
In the source book stuff, or the information for the prequel trilogy, they talk about, no, it's not the prequels. It was for The Force Awakens. They talk about, the word isn't navigator, but something Snoke's people.
Wayfinders?
No, it wasn't.
It's in Last Jedi. It's the people who are around there. I can't
Right,
remember.
but it was in, I think, the first one, Snoke had a group of people called I forget the name, but anyway, they were basically that kind of navigator type people. I don't know whether that was done independently, but they had Skywalker, my idea of Skywalkers, before that was put in. So whether it's independently done or they picked up on that and decided this makes sense, we'll add this in, especially since Snoke comes from the unknown regions, let's give him a group of navigators as well. I don't know if they picked up from me or whether it's independently done, but I got there first.
Right here in the red shirt.
So if you wanted, are there any other parts of the Star Wars universe, timeline, going back eons that you would like to see explored by other writers or you yourself? And which would those be?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I think it's a huge timeline, all sorts of things to go with. I could do something with the Chiss briefly came out of the Ascendancy, interacted to the Old Republic game, and then withdrew to their part of space. The one book that I know I would pitch if I thought I could get away with it, and I probably can't, now that Obi-Wan is going, wouldn't contradict it, but I've always assumed that Obi-Wan, after dropping Luke off on Tatooine, went off someplace at a good distance and started making a very noisy nuisance of himself so that the trail would go cold following Luke. And I would dearly love to do a book of Obi-Wan making a loud nuisance of himself.
That's
I think that
awesome.
would be a lot of fun. Since Obi-Wan, the series picks up 10 years later, I might be able to talk them into letting me do that. This would be when he's still idealistic, he's all raring to go, and before he's had 10 years of having to watch people suffer because he, a Jedi who wanted to help people, can't do it. The thrust of Obi-Wan's character at the moment. But when people are ready to listen to my proposals, I will slip that one in and see if it gets any traction.
All right, Mara Jade.
no surprise, I have more questions. So when it came to writing the original trilogy, what inspired you to create your character, and what did you think the ultimate character match?
What inspired you to write Mara? What did you think ultimately made her a good match for Luke?
Mara came about, first of all, back up. When I start doing the book, I'm starting with the plot. The characters are kind of cardboard cutouts that they fit a role. Okay, this is our villain, we'll call him Thrawn. This is somebody, we'll call her Mara Jade. And as I flesh out the outline and the story, the characters flesh out as well. Mara was originally in there because the opening of Return of the Jedi, the rescue of Han, is disconnected from the whole Rebels timeline. And I wanted to put some linkage between those. So it occurred to me, at the end of Empire, Vader has offered Luke an alliance against the Emperor. At that time, we didn't know that Palpatine changed subordinates like he changed socks. So I thought he might be perturbed by this sort of thing and want someone to go take care of Luke so this didn't happen. The obvious place is where Han is being kept prisoner. Luke is going to come there, set her up there. She has to be force sensitive so she can deal with the Jedi. Has to be out of the chain of command so that Vader won't get wind of this. So that's where the Emperor's Hand, special agent for Palpatine, came in. And because we had such an interesting dynamic between Leia, the upstanding citizen, and Han, the scoundrel, make this agent female and flip that dynamic between Luke, the upstanding, semi-naive farm boy, and Mara, the former assassin for the Emperor. I did think at some point, yes, they will get together, but by the end of The Last Command, it's way too soon. They can start a friendship, and we will work on that for later on. But yes, I always thought she would be a good match for Luke. Fortunately, they let me go ahead and do that, and they Hand of Thrawn to all spoilers.
Right here in the black.
If you could choose an actor to play Thrawn, who would it be in live action?
Actor to play Thrawn. I see my characters in terms of attitude and personality, not face and voice, so I'm not a good person to ask that. The names that other people have mentioned, Benedict Cumberbatch, who's kind of busy being Doctor Strange at the moment, I've heard has said he wouldn't do it anyway because it's too much makeup time to do it for his family. John Hamm was mentioned. Lucius Malfoy, what's the actor's name?
Jason Isaacs.
Yes. Various people. The current rumor, and again, it's a rumor, so hold lightly to it, is that they're going to go with Lars Mikkelsen, who did the voice in the Rebels. An accomplished actor in his own right, not just a voice actor. He already has the voice. He could definitely pull it off. That same rumor says that actor in Aladdin.
Yeah, him for Ezra. I'd like
Him for Ezra.
Yeah.
And having seen him and seen Lars, yeah, these would do very well for the characters, and the actors are good enough to set up a really good dynamic between them. So, fingers crossed on that, but again, until you see it on StarWars.com, hold it loosely.
All right, I think we've got time for one more, so I'm going to go with Loki.
Brilliant.
So I know you said that you don't have any contracts at the moment with this film, but if you did get the opportunity to write more after Return of the Jedi, do you have any ideas for where you would go with Eli Bronco or Vanya?
Where you would go with the other characters, like, are good crushes for what you like, or...
I have proposed in the past what I call the donut Thrawn book. A Thrawn book with no Thrawn in it. Basically, if they won't let me use Thrawn during the period he's gone from out of sight, that 9-year gap, I could do a book with Arlani,
Yes.
Eli Vanto, Ronan, some of the other characters from the Imperial trilogy, and if it would sweeten the pot, I could have them run into Snoke. One of my thoughts was Snoke had his own army and navy. We demolished it, which is why he had to then move over. Plan B is the First Order. That one hasn't gotten any traction, but I will probably pitch that before or after the Obi-Wan one.
I mean, whoever I have to go to for an Arlani book, I will do it. All right, one last question. Who's got a real good one?
And then come by the table
Yes.
and you can ask us.
Jeff.
Alright, so Mara is also one of my favorite female Star Wars characters of all time. And in your talk about this, have you had any ideas on how to bring her back into the new continuity?
Oh, I always have ideas how to bring Mara or anybody else back into continuity. Talon Card is also on my list.
Yes.
I can always bring people in. I can always write a story. If they want me to write Mara or Card, I can pitch a story that will bring them into canon without any problems. It's a question of what they will let me do and when they will let me do it.
Okay, and I think we are just about out of time, so everyone give a huge round of applause.